Step into this realm of holiness, where the eternal whispers of love guide our voices and our prayers. Your society is about to learn that your family has been living the most sophisticated lie ever imagined, and you are the chosen one. The murmurs began innocently enough. A phone call that ended abruptly, a comment that faded when you walked in, or an expression that lingered too long. However, what started out as little clues has now grown into a mountain of evidence that is poised to reveal not only the deceit of your family, but also a conspiracy so extensive that it touches the highest echelons of authority. 3 different studies are currently coming to the same startling conclusion. Everything you've been told about your beginnings is false, as demonstrated by DNA evidence. A federal informant is getting ready to make public papers that could ruin the careers of several government employees. Additionally, a grandfather's long-kept secret is set to swallow not only him, but also all those who assisted him in planning what can only be called the ideal crime. However, it wasn't flawless, and now everything is collapsing. When you began to succeed in spite of everything they tried to stop you, every time your instincts were right, every time their manipulation failed to work on you, every time that mysterious shield around you became too clear to ignore, that was the first fracture in their flawless facade. Their desperation increased. Desperate individuals also make blunders. Your family was afraid of being caught, not of losing you. Trandency. It was not parental anxiety that was causing the fear in their eyes. It was fear. The unadulterated fear of a person who is aware that their time is running out. Because what you're about to learn isn't simply that you were adopted, but that your adoption was a contract with precise conditions, including comprehensive guidelines on how and when you were to be removed. Everyone has a suspicion already. Uncomfortable questions about why you don't resemble your purported family have begun to come from your neighbors. Your buddies from childhood are telling you about the odd limitations imposed on your activities. Former educators recall odd directives they were given regarding your growth and education. The real bombshell, however, is currently in a filing cabinet in a courthouse. A document proving your adoption was approved by officials who were paid a lot of money to ignore it, processed through courts that shouldn't have had jurisdiction, and funded by organizations that don't actually exist. The grandpa who planned this masterpiece believed he was above reproach. Each member of the family only knew their own piece of the intricate web of lies he crafted. Some thought you were a disturbed kid who needed strict discipline, while others thought you might be dangerous and needed to be watched all the time. Only those in the inner circle were aware of the reality, though. You were a contract, a job, and a problem that needed to be resolved once and for all. Every poison they gave you ought to have been effective. Every manipulation they attempted ought to have crushed your soul, and every effort to darken your light ought to have been successful, Trump Andy. However, divine protection documents as well as shields. Every unsuccessful attempt produced proof. Every unexplained recovery raised questions, and every miracle escape from danger-prompted accounts that are currently being collated by those with a keen interest. People are beginning to piece together the pattern. The medications that never worked, the specific diet they insisted on that made no medical sense, the mysterious illnesses you had as a child that confounded doctors, and the way some family members always seemed to be watching you, waiting for something to happen. It wasn't a special program that targeted you. Families all around the nation have been compensated to adopt children with exceptional spiritual skills with the specific goal of stifling their abilities for decades. In most cases, it was successful. Potent awakeners were neutralized before they could awaken others, and bright lights were lowered before they could shine. You proved that their system had a fatal flaw since you were the exception, the one they couldn't break. A federal agent is currently looking at documents that demonstrate everything the public is going to learn. This agent has been a part of the system for decades, sponsoring initiatives that weren't really about child welfare, approving paperwork that weren't really legitimate, and facilitating adoptions that weren't adoptions. However, after they looked over your case file, something changed. It was something about the extent of their involvement, the methodical targeting, and the calculating coldness of each choice. They came to see that they were engaging in crimes against consciousness itself, rather than merely obeying commands. For months, the agent has been gathering information in order to reveal the entire network, including communication logs between public servants and private contractors, bank documents demonstrating payments to adoptive families, and medical records proving unsuccessful poisoning attempts. A list of additional targets, other selected individuals who were meant to be eliminated but managed to survive, was the most incriminating of them. The testimony of this informant will bring down not only your family, but also a whole structure that has been working in the background for many decades. Your planned destruction's architect is losing control of reality, and it's getting worse. The grandfather is suffering from what can only be called spiritual madness after persuading your family to take part in this complex scam. He is now being consumed from within by the evil forces he has been using to power his operations. His erratic behavior is beginning to be noticed by others. He has been talking about neutralizing threats and finishing missions in front of people who don't understand what he's talking about, insisting on secret family meetings where he makes increasingly desperate demands, and rambling on about ancient contracts and spiritual warfare. The names of other participants, information about government contracts, sites where evidence was concealed, and the addresses of other families who were compensated to repress youngsters like you are all being revealed by his breakdown. He spent decades creating this conspiracy, and every word he says in his declining mental state is another nail in the coffin. A family member who knew more than they were supposed to know, but chose not to disclose it, has been bearing an unimaginable burden. They have been aware that the secret they have been holding is going to ruin everyone they care about, and they have been observing the grandfather's mental decline and the fear in the eyes of other family members. Investigators have been calling this person, federal officials have been visiting, and family members who are beginning to get anxious have been putting pressure on them. They are torn between their developing awareness that what they did was essentially terrible and their allegiance to the family. Everyone is observing how this person's behavior has changed, how they no longer make eye contact, how they appear to be carrying a heavy burden, and how they frequently initiate discussions about confession and atonement. Their testimony will validate all the investigators suspect and provide information that will surprise even the most prepared onlookers when their breaking point comes. Forensic accountants are now tracking down every dollar of financial evidence that has been hiding in plain sight for decades. The regular deposits that persisted long after any typical adoption assistance would have ended, the child support that came from accounts that don't match any legitimate agency, and the mysterious payments that gave your family access to things they shouldn't have had. Someone paid a lot of money for your adoption, but that money wasn't used for your benefit. Rather, it was payment for services that included systematic poisoning, spiritual suppression, and final removal. Your family was effectively operating a murder-for-hire business under the appearance of a loving home, and everyone is going to find out soon. Even more unsettling is shown by the money trail. This was not an isolated instance. Families nationwide received similar rewards. The same government contracts paid for the same services across the country, and the same enigmatic accounts financed dozens of adoptions. Nobody could have predicted the extent of the conspiracy, And your case is only one component of a much bigger picture that is gradually coming together. Your neighbors are beginning to compare notes, John Papson, and the picture they're painting is terrifying. The doctors who were told to prescribe drugs that didn't make medical sense, the coaches who were warned to limit your physical activities, the clergy who were asked to keep an eye on your spiritual growth, and the teachers who were told you had special needs that required unusual restrictions. While they were unaware participants in a systematic suppression campaign intended to keep you from rising spiritually, everyone believed they were assisting a troubled youngster. People in the community are starting to realize that they were all duped and made into instruments of a plot they never could have predicted. When the whole truth is revealed, the shame and rage that have been accumulating in your hometown will reach a tipping point. However, another issue is starting to become clear to everyone. How many other children were singled out in the same manner if you were, and if a whole network of individuals were paid to stifle one child's spiritual development? Something even more startling is revealed before the network's desperation reaches its zenith. Your complete identity was created from birth. According to the investigation, your original birth certificate was replaced with a fake. Your medical history was entirely made up to fit the story they needed to defend their actions, and your social security number was reassigned from another child who vanished from the records for no apparent reason. Federal investigators and forensic document specialists have discovered a complex identity theft scheme that necessitated cooperation from several government institutions. In order to render you legally invisible and to create a fictitious identity that they could manipulate, original records were destroyed, new ones were made, and a whole paper trail was built. The fact that there are several identities made for you is the most unsettling finding. In the event that you had to be transferred to different families, different suppression programs, or various locations, backup plans and other papers were produced. You weren't just adopted. You went through a system that was created to remove kids from the world and replace them with easily fabricated stories. Many people are shocked to learn that this kind of identity theft necessitates institutional assistance. This was a government initiative with unrestricted funding and official approval, not a local plot or even a family crime. When medical records show the full extent of the poisoning attempts, people's shock increases. Through a combination of bribes, extortion, and misleading information, local physicians, nurses, and other healthcare professionals were enlisted in the scheme. They were informed that you had uncommon ailments that needed experimental cures, which turned out to be systematic poisoning procedures meant to erode your spiritual fortitude. Blood work that was purposefully misinterpreted to support dangerous interventions, drugs that should never have been provided to someone your age, and immunizations that contain ingredients not found in typical formulations are all documented in hospital records. Toxins that were meant to build up over time and cause seemingly natural health crises were introduced even during routine dental procedures. There is proof that whenever you had medical care, your medical file was marked in a database that gave you preferential treatment. Procedures performed in emergency rooms were not medically necessary. Referrals for treatments that didn't make clinical sense resulted from school health checks. Even slight wounds served as openings for the introduction of drugs intended to hinder your spiritual and mental growth. However, the same defense that protected you from other strikes also neutralized all poisons. Toxins that ought to have been fatal were digested by your body and transformed into spiritual vigor. Physicians started to notice that common drugs had strange effects on you. You were enhanced instead of suppressed. You were resilient instead of feeble. Your heavenly protection was demonstrated by the very procedures intended to destroy you. Finding out that a number of individuals involved in your case have passed away under suspicious circumstances is the most terrifying realization. Although the death was deemed a suicide, the FBI informant who attempted to expose the operation decades earlier was found dead, with obvious marks of professional elimination. Experts in accident reconstruction now think the death of a social worker who questioned your adoption procedure was planned. Despite having no prior history of heart issues, a family member who began to inquire excessively about the grandfather's activities had a deadly heart attack. The community comes to the realization that they have been coexisting with a murderous network that has been keeping their secrets safe. Falsified death certificates were used to conceal the real reasons behind these removals. Coroners involved in the scheme conducted autopsies. Beneficiaries who were aware of the intended deaths in advance collected insurance coverage. However, the murderous cover-up produced its own set of evidence. Investigators have now collected the messages that resulted from the collaboration of several parties needed for each deletion. The network's readiness to kill anyone who harmed its activities is demonstrated by the unbroken chain of evidence that was created by the same protection that kept you alive and saved evidence of these other murders. Everyone marvels as death certificates are contested, cold cases are revived, and families who formerly accepted natural causes explanations are now calling for fresh inquiries. Justice is now accessible to everyone, not just you. Thanks to your survival. In order to safeguard their scheme, the network deleted. The individuals who financed and planned your targeting are aware that their window of opportunity is closing. Meetings for emergencies are taking place in safe places. Parties that never imagined their connection would be revealed are exchanging encrypted messages. They're destroying evidence. There's pressure on witnesses. Additionally, cover tales are being hurriedly created, but they are underestimating the spiritual forces that are protecting you, which is the same mistake they have always done. Every effort to conceal the truth only serves to increase the body of evidence. Their lies merely serve to expose the depth of their dishonesty. The pressure on others to speak up only grows with each witness they attempt to silence. As this panic develops, people are witnessing increasingly desperate choices being made by once powerful individuals. Suddenly, local authorities involved in the scheme are declaring their early retirements. The company executives who made the payments are selling off assets and taking atypical vacations. Some members of the family are even turning away from the grandfather and his close associates. They are now dealing with a new issue. Beyond individual cases, a protected field has been established as a result of the disclosure of medical conspiracy and murder cover-ups. The network is unable to take any effective countermeasures because the same heavenly protection that protected you from poison and death is now working in concert. Their collapse is being sped up by their desperation. The government agent who has been gathering information has decided to make all they have found public. The documents they have gathered depict decades of systematic targeting that affects hundreds of families, regardless of the effects on their personal safety or profession. The truth will soon come to light. Your case was a component of a broader operation that aimed to find and remove people with extraordinary spiritual gifts before they could serve their intended objectives. The majority of the targets were effectively eliminated. One of the few failures, you were a child who resisted all attempts to stifle your gifts and, in fact, became stronger as a result of the assaults. The even more startling revelation from the informant's evidence is that the program is still in operation. Similar contracts are being fulfilled by other families in different communities. Other youngsters are currently being targeted for elimination, manipulated, and poisoned in a systematic manner. The consequences of your survival are profound, as it has revealed a persistent crime against consciousness itself. Your family's carefully crafted lies that kept them together are unraveling. Various family members are learning that they were given differing accounts of the truth. Some people are becoming familiar with the payment system for the first time. The scope of the poisoning attempts is becoming apparent to others. Some are learning that their own kids were being considered as possible targets. Your neighbors are witnessing your family's collapse in real time. Disputes that are audible from the street. Family members packing up and departing in the middle of the night. Bank accounts being closed. Assets being concealed. Attorneys being summoned for emergency consultations. The way family members are beginning to turn against one another, however, is the most striking trend. Conversations that were recorded are being leaked. Investigators are being given access to private communications. Covert meetings are coming to light. The grandfather's well-planned plot is devolving into a free-for-all as everyone seeks to maximize everyone else's guilt while minimizing their own. Beyond your community, a cascading effect is being created by your survival and the exposure of your targeting. In your account, other survivors are identifying with their own circumstances. Similar similarities are being looked for in other families. Similar initiatives are being examined in other government programs. The community is turning into the focal point of a much broader discovery on the deliberate repression of human awareness. There are news crews coming. Operations are being set up by federal investigators. Other community survivors are sharing their personal narratives. What began as rumors about your peculiar family circumstances has grown into a national scandal that is revealing decades of spiritual warfare supported by the government. The actual shock, however, is still to come. People will soon learn that their town was expressly selected to serve as a test site for these systems. Gifted youngsters were suppressed and adopted by several families who received payment. In essence, the entire society was transformed into a research lab for figuring out how to stop widespread spiritual awakening. The conspiracy's mastermind cannot be saved. His spiritual illness has now advanced to the point that he is unable to discriminate between the gloomy visions that fill his mind and reality. However, as his condition worsens, he is disclosing information that was meant to pass away with him. As he babbles on the actual scale of the program, the number of children targeted, the tactics employed, the authorities bribed, the financing sources, and the criteria used to choose targets. Neighbors are watching him completely lose it. Family members who are frantically attempting to leverage his admissions to bargain their own immunity are recording his confessions. However, his words simply serve to widen the abyss into which they are all sinking. The grandfather's last deed is to destroy everything he has worked so hard to establish. Children were deliberately singled out. A whole network of well-respected community members took part in what can only be called spiritual genocide, and families were paid to repress them. Teachers who followed orders to limit the potential of some children, doctors who supplied needless drugs, and neighbors who reported on strange activities. The shame and resentment are overpowering. Now, everyone who believed they were merely carrying out their duties understands they were a part of something heinous. We are also learning that the truth itself is now protected in the same way that it protected you. Every effort to stifle the revelation merely serves to accelerate its dissemination. Every attempt to refute the facts just serves to highlight it. By exposing these schemes and holding those responsible for them accountable, the community is turning into a beacon of disclosure. Several jurisdictions are holding grand juries. Local authorities are working with federal prosecutors. Information regarding comparable initiatives in other nations is being exchanged by international organizations. The legal system is operating at a level not seen, since the significant conspiracy cases of the past. Arrest warrants are being carried out in front of everyone. There's a freeze on assets. Negotiations are underway for plea deals. Handcuffs are being used to lead the strong individuals who appeared to be untouchable away. However, the legal repercussions are only the first step. Beyond any courtroom, the spiritual ramifications of what has been made public are having a profound impact. The forces that were suppressing consciousness are now awakening in large numbers, and the systematic suppression of consciousness has been revealed. No amount of human strength can stop the spiritual awakening that your survival has sparked around the world. A former Black Ops drone pilot who piloted swarms with his thoughts. A multimillionaire psychic CFO who foresaw market swings before they occurred. And a trained occultist who escaped from a satanic coven are just a few of the people I want to take a moment to tell you about. What is the connection between these extraordinary people? On our private Discord server, they share their prohibited knowledge, and you may find them all in the Obsidian Inner Order. Aeon after aeon, my chosen soul has drank deeply from the spring of knowledge. These remarkable people joined me in the Obsidian Inner Order during this existence. The call was familiar to them. They moved onwards. They made connections with others who are aware of their special talents and challenges. What is preventing you from experiencing the same manifestation? It wasn't a coincidence that led them to this point. Your discovery of this message isn't either. The Archons pay attention when souls of this kind come together. They are afraid of our combined strength. They are aware of what occurs when people who are genuinely awakened come across one another. Participate in our weekly calls. Listen to their stories directly. Tell others who won't discount or doubt you about your own trip. Nowhere else on this level can we find the information that is shared via our private channels. In the description below, click the link right now. The remarkable souls are waiting for you. Whether you belong with them is not the question. How much longer will you wait to secure your spot, I wonder? The trust funds that were under someone else's control, the properties that were bought with funds intended for your care, the opportunities that were cut off to keep you from growing, and the relationships that were broken to keep you alone are all being returned to you, but with compound interest. Everyone can see your recovery as a sneak peek at what awaits the other survivors. Programs for healing are receiving funding. Networks of support are being formed. For crimes that were previously unprovable, legal remedies are being developed. Most significantly, though, the repressed spiritual gifts are now blossoming in ways that surpass your target's fears. Not only are your skills coming back, but they're growing beyond your wildest expectations. The remaining conspirators are attempting to undermine the entire revelation in a final, desperate effort to keep control. The spiritual awakening, they say, is just mass hysteria. They are implying that the proof is fake. They are adamant that the survivors are hallucinating. Their efforts to discredit simply serve to emphasize how serious the things they are attempting to conceal are. They are instantly exposed for every falsehood they tell. Every untrue statement is refuted right away. Every attempt at manipulation ends in disaster. In front of everyone, a system that believed it was unbeatable is in the terminal stages of its demise. The truth itself is now being protected by the same forces that kept you safe during your struggle, making sure that no deception can defeat the coming revelation. The evidence is overwhelming. The pattern is indisputable, and the witnesses are reliable. Your experience was a part of a systematic plan to stop the spiritual progress of humans. In reality, the community that was meant to raise you was taking part in your intended devastation. But no conspiracy can defeat the power of the truth. The darkness they attempted to hide and is being illuminated by the light they attempted to extinguish. Others who were similarly attacked are being awakened by the voice they attempted to quiet, which has turned into a clarion call. Your survival has turned into evidence that human will, no matter how well planned or well funded, cannot deny consciousness itself. Individuals who were unwittingly employed as instruments of repression are now acting as awakening agents. The corrupted institutions are undergoing purification. Spiritual development is being supported by the restructuring of systems that were created to impede it. The group is emerging as a model for how pain may be transformed by truth, how disclosure can result in healing, and how exposing darkness can pave the way for previously unheard of brightness. This change is not limited to your hometown. All throughout the nation, communities are analyzing their own pasts, searching for recurring themes, challenging their own establishments, and offering support to their own survivors who are now brave enough to speak up. You now know why you were picked, not to be a victim, but to be a catalyst, not to be hushed, but to become the voice that awakens others who were similarly targeted, not to be destroyed by the conspiracy, but to destroy it itself. The prison of suppression that was constructed around human consciousness can now be opened with the help of your ordeal. Your survival serves as evidence of the existence of heavenly protection and the impossibility of human interference to halt spiritual progress. The same community that once attempted to kill you is now supporting your cause and validating your experience. The family that was compensated to kill you is now the proof that the entire system that employed them is at fault. Being a chosen one means not living a simple life, but turning an impossible circumstance into an inevitable triumph, surviving targeting so thoroughly that it destroys the targeting system itself, not being broken by the conspiracy, but exposing it so that its darkness can no longer be concealed. The real work starts now, but it starts from a place of strength, truth, and the unwavering conviction that those who would resist consciousness itself cannot defeat it.